a secure, portable, adaptable cloud structure that allows countries to retain their data sovereignty. We understand that's really important, especially in this part of the region. And how do we do that in a very simplistic way? But we all know, because we've been in this industry quite a long time, that to solve complex problems, you need complex solutions. But how do we simplify that? So from our standpoint, you know, intercloud is a big play. We are currently assessing that capability in this part of the world. We will be launching intercloud nodes around the globe, and the Middle East is definitely on our agenda. And we see this as a really a big move forward to Cisco. We announced this about 1 year ago, and we're now starting to see the architecture, the thought leadership around intercloud coming to fruition. So I guess as we go through the Q&A, Mike, you know, I'll be happy to answer any questions that goes into a little bit more detail. But I guess in summary, you know, we believe in a federation of clouds. We believe in a network of clouds. We believe in data sovereignty. It's important that the security wrapper is intense and comprehensive. And as we move forward, I think you're going to see Cisco use all of its experience of 30 years connecting the unconnected, now begin to connect the clouds in a federated fashion.
Thank you, Mike. And I think it was quite interesting yesterday. Someone mentioned that the countries that were able to innovate in terms of startups and in terms of driving their economies through innovation, they have one thing in common, which is a strong networking infrastructure, and have invested in providing that infrastructure in their countries. And I think that is very much in line with what you're describing.
Agreed, Mike.
I'd like to introduce Rudy Rudiger, who is, sorry, Rudy Dern, who is a Microsoft cloud specialist and expert and CTO, and will give a short presentation about cloud.
Yes, thank you, Mike. I just wanted to add a couple of words. I think they fall along the lines that you've already started and already what you mentioned around the data center expansion. So when we look at what's happening at the moment in terms of scale, you gave the example of 270,000 servers in our Chicago data center. Just wanted to add that I'm part of the CTO office. We just launched 2 data centers in Brazil, 1 in Australia, 3 in India, and more are on the horizon. So just multiply that number and you can understand what it means for us, how fast we have to innovate as Microsoft. So how fast we to give those cloud services to our customers. So actually this means there's a lot of change inside a company like Microsoft. You know Microsoft as a desktop company, Office and Windows, etc. Expect a lot of changes to Office and Windows and our products in the future. So maybe you have already found out that we are changing our release cycles. It is all caused by the cloud, because in the cloud you move from longer, bigger releases into smaller incremental releases. And this is what's happening at the moment. So you see a lot of changes in the pricing models, in the release cycles, in the way how we interact with customers in terms of subscription models, new contract formats, all caused by the cloud. So Microsoft is going through a huge change, through a huge transformation. What makes me happy is when I look at the share price is that our share price has gone up over the last 2 years, almost by 50%. So it appears that at least the financial community seems to believe that we are going down the right direction. What we feel as Microsoft is very much in line with what Mike showed for Cisco. I can ask the question, who in the room is looking at a private cloud? And probably I would see a couple of hands going up. A lot of companies, a lot of government entities are starting to build their private cloud. All kept in-house for data privacy, sovereignty control reasons. However, this model does not necessarily deliver the economies of scale, the business benefits, and the continuous innovation. So all these customers start to look at, how do I add additional clouds for example, from service providers, HP, Cloudera, all these other service providers that are there that may have data centers in the country, etc., or public players like Microsoft. And how do I bring all of this together? So I would argue all the government customers, all the public sector customers, and even the private customers that I talk to, they're looking at a picture that looks like that. A combination of an in-house cloud, a third-party service provider cloud, and some public components from companies like Microsoft. So the question is, what is that fabric? How do you tie these things together in terms of an identity management? What is the security wrapper that is needed? And this is really where I would argue you get into conversations and into challenges that are not technical. They are much more related around what is your overarching cybersecurity strategy? What is the data encryption strategy? What do you expect from your cloud provider, from a company like Microsoft? What do you apply in your own data center? How do you build a data security layer that stretches between your own cloud and the cloud that you're tapping into in your service providers and externally? How do you work around the data sovereignty and data privacy issues? Let's say you are in the healthcare space, you want to do really new things around genomics. You will not be able to get the compute power for gene sequencing on a massive scale in your own cloud, but how do you do that in a secure way? So how can you tier data? How can you define data locations for sensitive data to adhere with your legal requirements, and at the same time tap into the innovation and the economies that the cloud provides? And then last not least, how do you respond to all these compliance and certification issues that you have around your operations that you have in your own data centers, and what do you expect from your cloud providers again, both from a more horizontal perspective, management of data centers, etc., but also industry-specific scenarios, government, financial service requirements. How do you build that connection and integrate between your own cloud and the public cloud and service provider clouds? And those are the challenges that we increasingly start to tap into, and which need to be answered in order to really make that, call it intercloud or call it hybrid cloud, as we would call it, work in the future, where you deploy the best and most appropriate cloud model for your business scenario. So those are the thoughts I wanted to leave you with for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudy. Let's continue with Tony Price from HP.
I have the pointer.
The clicker.
Thank you. Thank you. Sabah al-khair, Lissa. It's 10 minutes to 12. Thank you for taking the time and coming to listen to us. And I'd like to thank the organizers for keeping the MENA ICT going. I've been coming to Jordan for the better part of 30 years of my career, so it's always a pleasure to be here. If I might have the slides, please. Okay.
The HP slides.
The HP slides. The ones that talk about OpenStack and where I'm going to try to disrupt as the theme of this conference is. So it's a bit about disruption, partially agreeing with the gentleman here about intercloud and their public surface, and partially disagreeing where, you know, that's it. So really, without wanting to put people in boxes, there are two types of populations that profit from the cloud. Those that want to save money, either by being more efficient. So I saw a show of hands about people building their own private cloud. You'll be able to be more efficient, deliver services quicker. And those that want to save some capex, so save me money. The other one is, how am I going to make money out of you specifically, so I can deliver services? And HP is not in that business. We want local service providers to build their own clouds to be able to help people like yourselves building private clouds to burst into them. Who of you has had this scenario where, as an IT director or somebody that has to deliver an application to a customer, you've been faced with somebody asking you for an application? 15 steps. I used to run an IT organization, and I definitely had to go through all of this to be able to deliver an application. And if one of my constituents had a good idea, by the time I was able to buy the servers, deploy them, patch them, set up the VMwares, have a committee on who has the right to access what, the time to market had gone. So cloud technologies are going to specifically help you circumvent this process in a private cloud. So the way we see this is a bit around hybrid clouds running out there. Clouds that you will be able to access to consume some of the services that you don't have locally. So if you don't have a big data application and you want to, as a telco, for example, look at the reasons of churn, you'd be able to consume one out there. On the other hand, if you're delivering a sensitive ERP solution, it would be local. So we see the world going towards hybrid clouds that are both secure and reliable. So you'd start off with a service catalog. I apologize for the size of the service catalog, but a consumer would go and look at the service catalog based on a series of processes and consume those services, whether they're local, running on a classical traditional IT, one server to one application, or on a virtualized environment, or somewhere else outside the premises. So really, anything as a service, right? In self-service mode. All of this is around relieving the IT organization from having to do things and deliver IT as a service. So they better align and become more reactive as well as more relevant. From anywhere, any type of infrastructure from wherever the application is located, and from a heterogeneous environment. All of that being based on an open standard, on OpenStack, using Tosca, and I won't delve too much into this, but it's all around being able to moving your workloads anywhere you want them to be, not necessarily out on a specific vendor's platform. And this is really where the crux of the matter lies. Building a cloud that is open, that you can actually control yourself, and it doesn't control you, right? So all of that with full automation. So that's really the vision. Private hybrid clouds that reach out and consume applications that they don't have locally, but also work locally on their own in their own infrastructure. Some of the drivers for an open source cloud are the following. You probably know them. You know, you have, I'll just put them out there, but really the scaling and the low cost, as well as the availability of numerous resources that can provide things. The drawbacks are also out there. Security is one of them, reliability is another, being able to get support is a third. In the interest of time, I'll pass on it, but I do want to stress that having an open environment with technology that works, and I'm not saying that, the web is saying that. If you look at the pie charts above me here, you'll actually see that the major components of the web are really open source. And this is why we believe that the future for cloud is hybrid clouds that are run on OpenStack or open source. You know, that's what it looks like, and that's what the future will be. All right, open source will be the infrastructure of the cloud in the coming. Really, it's a software layer that abstracts you from the hardware layer and allows you to develop workloads that are portable. For a country like Jordan, this is extremely important. You have a very well-educated, very hardworking, I might say, population that is going to use its competence to be able to develop both services and products that are portable across clouds in the world, okay? And with His Majesty further encouraging ICT in Jordan, I think this is the path to go to. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. So I invite now Amr Wadala, founder of Cloudera, and CTO, somebody with a lot of experience with making very strategic decisions about cloud, to tell us about how you have been leveraging cloud to build your company.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to stand up. I don't know how to do presentations while sitting down, so forgive me for that. First, I have a surprise for you. I'm actually not going to talk about cloud. You already heard a lot about cloud. I will be talking about big data. So first, I would like to get a show of hands in the room. How many of you heard about this term big data before? If you can please raise your hand. Okay, that's very promising. I'm seeing almost 80% of the hands in the room go up. I have another quick question. How many of you heard about the term EDW, Enterprise Data Warehousing? If you heard about that, please raise your hand. That's about 20% in the room. How many of you heard about the word Hadoop? Hadoop. I would say that's another 20% of the room. So these are some of the concepts that I'll be teaching you about in this very brief presentation. First, about myself. I'm from Egypt. I went to the United States, California, about 20 years ago in 1995. My goal was to get my PhD from Stanford University and then go back to Egypt and teach. But unfortunately, the Silicon Valley and Stanford corrupted me and made me forget about this teaching thing. And I stayed there. Out of Stanford, I started my first company, which was acquired by Yahoo. And I spent about 8 years at Yahoo. And then 6 years ago, I left them and I started this company, Cloudera, which I'm going to tell you about in a second. Very happy to be here in Jordan. First time for me to be here. Love this country from the few days I've been here so far. Very proud also to be up here on stage with companies like Microsoft, Cisco, and HP, which are all partners of Cloudera. So Microsoft, about 3-4 weeks ago, there was a very big event where our Chief Strategy Officer and my co-founder, Mike Olson, was on stage with the Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, talking about the partnership between Cloudera and Microsoft Azure, which is their cloud offering. So now you can run our platform on top of that service. Cisco, we have a long-standing relationship, more than 3 years now, where Cisco resells the Cloudera platform with UCS. UCS is the Cisco Data Center Server line of compute that they provide with the network and everything else. And then HP, actually the majority of the Cloudera deployments in our big customers are all running on HP servers. So we definitely have a very strong partnership there as well. So very, very proud to be up here with you guys. Cloudera, we were founded 6 years ago. I come from Yahoo, so you can see the Yahoo logo up there. My co-founders, they come from Facebook, Google, and Oracle. There was only 4 people of us back then. Today at Cloudera, there is almost 800 people working at Cloudera. We have customers. I'll show you some of the customers' logo. Our customers tend to be very, very large organizations and governments. We have a very large partner ecosystem, more than 1,200 partners, but some obviously very key ones like the ones you can see on stage today. And we have trained more than 100,000 people worldwide on how to work with this big data technology. How is it disruptive? What does it mean? Cloudera, I'm very proud to say, we raised more than $1 billion in funding at the company. That's how quickly this company is growing. A lot of that funding actually comes from Intel. So Intel is about 75% of that funding comes from Intel. But Google, Dell, T. Rowe Price, Accel, Greylock, Fidelity, a number of other investors hold shares in Cloudera. So what do we do for you? What do we do for our customers? We help our customers leverage the power of all their data to ask bigger questions. So what does that mean? 2 parts. All their data mean any type of data. Historically, in our organizations, we had only one type of data, which is structured, relational, transactional data. Today, the picture is much different. We have still transaction data, but then now we have semi-structured data, which comes from mobile devices and web servers, logs. And we have unstructured data like emails and social media, videos, images, etc. How do we leverage all of that data together? That's truly how our platform is disruptive. The other important aspect of our platform, which makes us disruptive, which was Tony highlighted earlier, is the fact it's open source. At the heart, it's open source. And for most of the implementations in the data center, the shift towards open source is a very big one. So why is this big data thing happening today? Why is big data happening today? Big data is happening because of two things. Number one, the IT movement. Because of the IT movement, because of why we are all here today, a lot of our business is happening inside of computers. And computers don't sleep. Computers keep making data all the time. That's one aspect. The other reason why big data is happening is the Internet of Things. We are now collecting data about the physical world better and faster than ever before because of mobile devices, low power Bluetooth, RFID tags, GPS equipment, satellites, imaging. We are collecting way more data about the physical world, what's happening in the physical world, more and faster than ever before. That's why big data is happening. Big data is characterized by what we call the 3 V's, the 3 V's of big data. And that's one of the things I would like you guys to remember from this brief presentation. The 3 V's. The first V is volume. Volume, just the size. It's much bigger data than we have before. The second V is variety. Variety. Many different types of data. So not just transaction data, semi-structured data, emails, PDF documents, images, and so on. That's variety. And number 3 is velocity. And velocity is about rate of growth, how quickly the data is growing, but also rate of change. If you have one of these V's, you need a new solution. The existing solution you have is not going to work for you. And that's where our platform comes in. Our platform is based on concepts that Google has published. Google published about 10 years ago 2 very key papers. These papers are called the Google MapReduce paper and the Google File System paper. In these papers, Google sent us 2 messages to the industry. One message is a business message, which you see here, and the other message is a technology message, which I'll show on the next slide. The business message. The way that we have been managing and leveraging data inside of our organizations and enterprises is flawed. It's wrong. We have been doing it that way, as you can see on the left there. We have been making copies of our data every time we want to run a new application. That leads to fragmentation, it leads to duplication, and makes it very hard for our companies and organizations to get a 360 view of how our customers are interacting with us. Google said the correct approach is the one on the right. You will only be innovative and you will only be able to serve your customers correctly if instead you have one big pool of data and the applications come to the data. In fact, this is the only thing I want you to remember from this entire presentation. If I meet you a year from now, when I come back to visit Jordan and ask you what was the one thing I asked you to remember, it's this. Bring applications to the data, and instead of sending data to the applications. And to help make that concept stick with you guys, I use an analogy, which is I usually bring out my phone. Oops, I guess it's wrong to put the clicker in my pocket. Okay, hopefully that works now. The analogy is, why are you, over the last 6 years, why do you shift almost 90% of your photo-taking behavior, and I saw actually many phones in the room now come up and take pictures. Why did you shift 90% of your photo-taking behavior to be with this device? And I usually get 2 answers for that question. The answers I get is, number 1, convenience of size. It's small enough, I can have it in my pocket. We had cameras that were small enough in our pocket. And talking about disruption, these cameras are gone. Nobody uses these cameras anymore. The true power, though, the true power of the smartphone and why we take pictures with it is the power of sharing. It's the power of data in one place. When I take that picture, when I have that data inside of my smartphone, that data is now immediately visible to my email, my Facebook, my Instagram, my calendar, my Snapchat, if you use Snapchat. I don't have to copy the file and put it on a flash card or a USB stick and go put it in my laptop before I can run my application on top of that data. That's what makes you very innovative and agile and quick as an individual. Now, if you think about enterprises, we have been living in this very messed up world. And it's time we move to this world where we can leverage our data immediately as soon as it's captured. Again, that's the key message I want you to leave with. Bring applications to the data, not the other way around. I don't have time to go over the slide. However, this is very important. This is the technology behind this platform and what makes it so scalable and so powerful. So if you want to learn more about it, I highly recommend you go to YouTube, and on YouTube, search for the word Hadoop, which is one of the words I asked about at the beginning. You can see it up on the left there, H-A-D-O-O-P. The first result you get from YouTube should be my face. And that is from a lecture that I gave at Stanford a few years ago, explaining the power of this technology and how it achieves the flexibility that allows it to work with any type of data and achieves the performance and scale that allows us to keep growing with as much data as you have got. So this is kind of the summary, and then I want to just briefly give you a use case. But the summary of what this platform enables is an active archive that allows you to keep your data alive for a very long time. Acceleration, we have customers that the processing time of their data went down from hours to minutes. We had an insurance company that was doing pricing policy for insurance. They could only do their pricing once every 50 days before they adopted our platform. Today, they can do it every 8 hours, from 50 days to every 8 hours. That's the kind of performance and scale that you get with this platform. This platform unlocks agility and innovation, and that's because of something called schema on read, which is a very important concept, which again, I can't explain here due to the lack of time. But again, if you go watch that lecture from Stanford, you will learn more about schema on read and why it's very powerful. Last but not least, this platform enables what we call advanced analytics, which allows you to go beyond SQL. Can I get a show of hands? How many of you heard about SQL, SQL? Okay, it's about maybe 50% of the room. For the other 50%, SQL is the most common query language for asking questions of our data. It's very powerful, but it can't do everything we would like to do with our data. Our platform allows you to go beyond SQL. These are some example customer logos from different industries, and you can see this technology is applicable across every industry. We have customers in the government segment, telecommunications, finance, healthcare, retail, you name it. And the reason why is, again, we all have data. That data is coming from our computers running our business, but also coming from us instrumenting our real world business and collecting data from our real world. And that's the one example I want to give you. This example is from a company called Monsanto. Fact first. Did you guys know that over the next couple of decades, we will eat as much food as we ate over the last 10,000 years? Just think about that. When I say we will eat, I don't just mean the people in the room here. I mean all of Earth. And the reason why we're living much longer than ever before because of all of the enhances with health and because of big data helping us with genomics and so on. And we keep having babies. So Monsanto, what they try to do, what this company tries to do, and they use our platform for it, is collect a lot of data from the fields, from the farmers. How quickly are the plants growing, the temperature, the soil composition. There's lots of sensors that measure all of that and take pictures of the plants as they grow. And they feed that, all of that into a big system that does A/B testing to come up with new types of seeds that can be grown in different environments and at different time of year. In fact, they print back for the farmers, they print back a map. They print back a map that shows them, in this part of the field, this is the seed you should be planting, and this is the fertilizer you should be using. In that part, this is the other seed you should be planting, and this is how you should be irrigating it with water. And this is only possible because of platforms like this today. So again, I'll conclude, and sorry I went a little bit over my time. I hope not too much over my time. And just remind you to please remember the one thing. It's time to bring applications to the data, not the other way around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amr. I think you have already sparked a question from the audience. So.
And I would like to ask a question to Dr. Amr. And my question is, how I'm using Spark actually. It's not CDH5, the one that's from Cloudera. And we are running actually benchmarks, and it turns, like Spark turns on caching in the workers, Hadoop workers, and it's proven to be 10 times faster than CDH5. So I'm wondering, what is Cloudera doing to like speed up or catch up with Spark, especially when we are running our scripts? And I'm, by the way, from an analytics company. It's analytics with the Z company. And we are proud of actually doing this here in Jordan for R and Spark. And we use not Azure, although we got some funding from BizSpark, but we are using Amazon, AWS, EC2, and Medium. And I'm wondering what Cloudera in specific is doing to compete with Hortonworks or with MapR, and how they are going to compete with the next phase, which we are calling now Hadoop 2, and what they are doing specific with the Spark and Spark R. Thank you very much.
So it's a very good question. It's a bit more technical below the level where it's very interesting to the whole entire audience. But very briefly, I would say Apache Spark is a very new, compelling technology that speeds up computation. We realized that. We added Apache Spark now as part of our platform. So we include Apache Spark in CDH5 now. If you're using that, you can start using Apache Spark with CDH5. In terms of how do we compete, we were the creators of this market. We were there before anybody else. 2008, nobody would even saying the word big data. And yes, there has been a number of other companies now coming after us, trying to beat us. And we'll beat them by just staying ahead of them, continuing to do a lot of work with our very key partners here on stage, and building better products. That's the way, that's how you beat your competition. So we can talk more offline with more detail. Yes.
I'd like to ask Mike. You talked about multiple clouds and connecting multiple clouds, and I'd like to understand a little bit more, how does Cisco enables that? Because it's a big need in the markets in this region. How do you enable, data sovereignty? How do you enable the connection, the secure connection of all these clouds?
So before I answer that, I think the move towards fast IT, which is kind of, it's upon us all now. And I think, especially for the country of Jordan, where I think there's a super opportunity now if, if we enable the network, which is going to enable people to access data. But what's more important than data is information. Your point about bringing applications to data is a good point. I think what's most effective is how you interpret that data in terms of what information it provides that enables you to make good business decisions or good decisions from a consumer standpoint. Our kind of philosophy to your question, Mike, around intercloud and why we feel that's important. Public cloud is growing faster than private cloud. Private cloud is still the dominant cloud right now across the world. And to your point, really, about security, that's why folks do it, and I get that. But we've got this notion of hybrid cloud as well. So our thinking was rudimentary, right? We didn't believe that having spent 30 years in the networking industry, that and all the lessons we've learned, and having watched all the mistakes other companies have made, we didn't believe that we would embark and take on the whole cloud challenge ourselves. We felt that if we could federate and if we could create a technology, our intercloud fabric technology, that could link multitude of clouds, ensure security cross clouds, working with our partners and service providers, because we feel they're very well placed to deliver services to every country around the world. Again, you know, we could go really deep into how we do that from a technology standpoint, but for the purposes of this audience, I think the key message is that, you know, with our stack around the data center, you know, in terms of our UCS platform, our UCSD, our application-centric infrastructure technology now, which secures the data center, as that links to our intercloud nodes, you know, this intercloud fabric ensures that we protect data as it crosses clouds, and also that data doesn't leave a cloud if a client or a consumer doesn't wish to do so. Right. I think last point, or a couple of points, if I may, you know, data, to your point, is growing exponentially, right? So just in the data center, in less than 4 years, data center traffic will increase by 3 times, right? Threefold. Of that threefold increase in data in less than 4 years, 75% of that, or 3/4, will be cloud-based data, right? So this wealth of data around, you know, and if you bring the digital world on top of the physical world, the notion of Internet of Everything or Internet of Things, you know, again, to your point, you know, the data is just going to grow more rapidly, and more rapidly. So we believe that in 2018, just the notion of Internet of Things or Internet of Everything could generate an incremental 400 zettabytes of data. Just get your head around that, right? So again, a couple more data points just to back up your point is that, you know, again, in less than 4 years' time, you know, as we see this data explosion, you know, it's how you interpret that data, how you drive that into more information by which you make decisions that will help countries, will help corporations, and will help the consumer.
Correct. Thank you. So Rudy, one of the things that I very often come across is government cloud. How much should it be private? How much should it be secure? How do governments in different places across the world leverage public cloud? Because in some cases we see that building the infrastructure from scratch, you know, takes a long time, is expensive, and in some cases, you know, there is a pressing need to get things done and to leverage, you know, public cloud. So do you have any examples of how successful governments have been able to implement cloud?
Yeah, so it's very, very nice to be here in Amman in Jordan, because actually Jordan is a country with a, I would say, very ambitious and successful government national cloud program. The basic idea behind a national cloud is, when you think about the economics of the cloud and the idea that the more users, the more workloads, the more transactions you run, the cost point will decrease, then effectively as a government you will come to the conclusion that this is all about centralization. So all governments in Europe, Middle East, and Africa have gone through that step in the thinking and have come up with national cloud plans. So the majority of the countries now have an idea where they want to go with a national cloud strategy, which is more or less centralized. So it is the idea to generate economies of scale inside an own country based on the data residency and sovereignty requirements that you do not want to have that data leave the country. The key success factors and where we see the successful ones differentiate from the non-successful ones, I would say, again, not on the technical side, but more on the side of a governance model. So if you build that cloud, and you build it, for example, in one ministry, Ministry of ICT, will there be a mandate? Will there be a governance structure that actually will make that cloud available? And will there be a motivation for other agencies to adopt that cloud? And this is where we see a lot of countries struggle, also in Europe, that there was a lot of investment in cloud infrastructures that now sit there and actually compete with the Microsoft public cloud or a HP service provider cloud, because the governments will still make that change. And to that extent, I would say the clearest approach has happened in the UK, where there's a cloud registry and what is called the G-Cloud program, where vendors register and they get on the catalog, and then this is the catalog, and you can go through a cloud adoption without further due diligence, further RFPs and procurement processes. So actually it speeds up procurement and actually brings the costs down for the government and actually for the private sector. So it is the governance structure that sits around the national clouds that decides whether a national cloud will be a success or not. However, there is the intrinsic danger, and we see this now after 3 years working with various governments, that if you do not deliver fast enough, your internal customers will turn away. And this will actually be the biggest challenge, that if you don't do it fast enough, actually the investment will be.
That's actually a great point. And one of the things that we often hear is that a government should never, put any data on any public cloud. But then in some cases we hear that, where a government has a lot of public data, so data that is already available on the web, for example, then that data is already published, it's already available, it's already, out there. Then there is no reason why, this data should be encrypted and, kept under key and lock, and why this should not be deployed in another data center. So the point that you're making is that the way to utilize these investments in private cloud data centers, government cloud data centers, and public cloud data centers is to have a good governance and good guidance on what can sit where, and then agencies and different parts of the country would be enabled to make the decisions and put their data and utilize the data centers in the right place.
Let me make a quick point and then pass on to my colleagues. This is exactly what we see. With big data, I think this whole information policy system that we have in place is falling apart, because now we do not have the rigid, this is sensitive, this is non-sensitive decision anymore. It becomes much more difficult because we get all this sensor data that may be related to, let's say, police video surveillance. It's police data. Police data is secret or confidential data, but is video data from CCTV cameras still sensitive? So we have to rethink, and that's what we collaborate with governments. We have to rethink information policy system. We have to rethink our risk assessment frameworks, in which we say, what is the risk associated with that particular piece of data sitting in a cloud outside the country? And also, I think we have to become much more rational, and this is what's happening throughout the last couple of months and years. We have to be rational about the risk assessment. What is actually the risk of storing a piece of data, for example, about CCTV information and police CCTV information in a data center in Dublin, versus a data center that sits in a country that is not backed up 3 times and doesn't have the disaster recovery mechanism? You have to have some sort of a risk assessment framework, and I think this is where a lot of the policymakers are thinking towards how can we modernize risk assessment for governments, and this is where we work also from a Microsoft public sector perspective with the governments to help them in the information policy, in the risk assessment frameworks, because that will help them to make the better decisions on which cloud actually to take and optimize the IT investment strategy.
One of the examples I heard were, to the point that you're making, police speeding tickets, traffic light tickets from radars. And, they take a picture of the car, that is actually, going through a red light. And then, how sensitive is this? And, how long do you have to store it? And who is going to access it? And, what is the point of, paying a lot of money for that storage?
Just to build on Rudy's comment, I think you made a really great point about policy. You mentioned the word policy. I think as we kind of think about public-private hybrid, this is where, as we think through what the cloud would look like, or a combination of clouds would look like, it's really imperative that we're able to risk assess and we're able to apply the right kind of rules. And also, those rules and regulations and regulatory demands will differ from country to country. So what you can do in one country, you can't do in another country. So the agility and the flexibility, and I kind of make the point once again, is that there's no one cloud, right? There's a federation of clouds. It's the way IT is being demanded, and it's the way it's being consumed. And as we build this out, it's fundamental to me. Having a background in IT for quite a long time now, that says, the more meaningful you can apply policy to the data, gives you greater control and flexibility and security.
No, completely agree. And yeah, it depends on the data, and that's our job, is to help our customers figure out which types of data are sensitive and which are not. So for example, we have a number of customers, governments that use us for tax collections. That's very sensitive. That absolutely has to be locked down and you have to know exactly where it is. Versus if you're collecting data from sensor networks and the traffic sensors, not as sensitive. It's okay for that to be in the cloud. But I just want to comment briefly on your comment about the traffic lights and the pictures that these cameras take. No, that's extremely sensitive because using that data, your wife can figure out whether you were visiting your mistress. That's how sensitive that data is. And that's why if you look at Google Earth, if you go use Google Earth, that's why if you zoom in on the car license plates, they mush them out, so you can't really see what's the license plate exactly for
it's a good point.
For things like that.
It's a good point, but then you know, data sovereignty, you know, whether my wife can get to the data if it's in Dublin or whether it's in my home country. But Tony, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, there is a lot of data centers over the last few years that have been built and are underutilized. And I hear from a lot of people, you know, that, you know, multi-million-dollar data centers and, you know, the utilization of these is still something that is relatively low. What is the advice that you would give to your customers? You know, how would you guide them through that?
One of the ways HP is addressing this issue. We've already addressed this in the European Union through an initiative called Cloud 28+, and we're extending this worldwide to something called the HP Helion Network, which is, and we're building this currently in-house, launching end of December, is something called the HP Helion Network, which is a catalog that catalogs, sets up a cloud of clouds and allows, let's say, a service provider in Durban, or let's say Sandton, which is where the underutilized center is in South Africa, to publish a service catalog that somebody in Alaska can use in a manner that all of this, also, of course, we would encourage them to base it on an open source solution, so portability can be done. And at the end of the day, you'll have people that can consume applications from service providers that are not in country, that are somewhere else, and at the same time enrich the central catalog. It will allow people to stop building data centers and utilizing what they have, becoming also a driver for employment, for to get people to do some work. So it's called HP Helion Network. We've revealed it in London on the 7th of November, and we'll launch at Discover Barcelona on the 5th of December. Okay? So the solution is to build a cloud of clouds that is based on an open source solution for portability of the load. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
We just have time for one question, I think. Sorry. Yeah, I know. We've run over time, but
it's okay.
If you could just make it quick, please.
My question is to Dr. Amr. He mentioned that the 3 V's of big data, which is actually the volume, the velocity, and the variety of the data. However, my question is whether the algorithm and techniques that use to interpret these data in order to transfer it to a valued information, is it that important? Because I think that the competition among those who provide big data is about the algorithm itself. Otherwise, if it's not, no matter how it's huge the data is, as long as you don't have the good algorithm and techniques, it's not going to be turned out to a kind of valuable information for the customer.
Yes, absolutely agree, and thanks for highlighting that. The 3 V's are more about defining what is big data. The 3 V's are not about what do we do with big data. What do we do with big data is exactly what our platform provides, which is the ability to be able to absorb any type of data, but then apply to it the algorithms and the applications in different ways. One of these ways is the legacy SQL way, which we all know and is good for a lot of problems, but cannot do more of the advanced image processing or sentiment analysis from text, et cetera, And exact algorithms play a very, very big role of that, which is extremely important. Thanks for highlighting that. Yes, very good question.
One final. There is another question.
Yes, yes. There's a question about the governance of data that I'd like to ask the panel. The slide Amr showed us is very revealing. And I work on e-government, and even though there are many countries that are developing clouds for government, unfortunately these clouds are not used. And you see a lot of data hogging in each ministry, which has their siloed application, and are duplicating data and making life very complicated for citizens and for businesses. So what is your advice? How do you sell that data sharing to governments?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I see that in many places. So big data and leveraging data for good and for better and for revenues is a culture shift. It's not just a technology shift, it's also a culture shift. So one example from a country, I'm not going to name, I come from that country, is where they were doing a study about schools and school locations and how to optimize them. And the education ministry would not give back the study agency the data. They would not give them back how to optimize the placement of school. And that agency had to go to the telecommunications industry, ministry, and based on the cell phone locations of the teachers, they were able to get a very good map of the schools to try and solve that problem. And that just goes back to us as governments and organizations realizing the power of data and stop this hogging thing. This hogging thing is holding us back. And that's what's going to make our competition or other governments beat us.
Just to add one comment, just to emphasize a point you made, it's really, you know, technology is phenomenal, right? You can drive pretty much anything you want to do with technology, but if you don't address the people part and the process part, which I think was your question, that's where policy is not just a technology decision, it's a people and a process principle as well. And you're exactly right, you have to change the mindset and the culture and insist on it, right? Because, you know, to your point, you know, the minute you can put your arms or hook the data better, you can make better decisions, and it's for good of the people, the country, the businesses, you know, entrepreneurs. But it's as much about people and process as it is about technology.
It's really mainly about people and processes.
Yeah, it's about the governance structure, and
it's about 80% of it on people and processes. Technology comes a little bit later. Getting in a ministry somebody to be able to, on a simple private cloud, to order a server can be, you know, you remove the power of the IT director. It can be seen that way. So putting the process in place is and getting people to accept that is paramount. So you need a change agent when you're deploying a cloud. Having a change agent deployed with it is important. A change agent is a person, you know, that can get A to talk to B. You know?
Yeah, it is a process, a culture change that takes time. There is a study by an IT company which is not on this panel, a very big one, and they did a study on what are the top priorities for top policymakers around the world. And for the first time last year, ICT was first. So there is a growing awareness of ICT being a critical enabler for governments within the top politicians of our planet, which I think will help to solve that problem over time, but it will take a while because you still have to build the governance structure and then work and make it work. I just wanted to make one point around another issue that you see many times, that the data is stovepiped and the data sits in different formats. I think we need to do more work around, and I would want to be very clear here to distinguish between what is open source versus open standards. We need open standards. And the European Union is putting a lot of effort into open cloud standards that allow interoperability of data between different clouds. That doesn't mean open source, that means open source, Microsoft, IBM, HP, Cisco, etc. We need open standards. And I think this is a critical enabler also to help you in your government over time, that people can shift data between clouds more easily. And again, it needs work. It doesn't come for free.
Thank you so much. I think we are out of time. It was a wonderful discussion. And I hope that cloud will continue to be an enabler for Jordan, and for letting Jordan, also address the world markets and the regional markets, because one of the things about cloud computing is it's one connected big world, and the opportunities are huge in this world. Thank you.
That was a terrific lineup and a great discussion. Thank you all. Okay, we continue.